It all began on a morning that felt too ordinary to be real. The kind of morning where the sunlight filters through the blinds just right, and the world seems to pause for a moment. But even then, I should have known. Something was off. My name is Nick Dunn, and this is the story of how my life unraveled, or maybe how it was unraveled for me. I woke up to an empty bed. Amy's side was cold, the sheets neatly tucked in, as if she'd never been there at all. At first, I didn't think much of it. Amy was an early riser, always one step ahead of the day. But when I walked downstairs, the house was silent. Too silent. Amy. I called out, my voice echoing through the empty rooms. No answer. That's when I saw it. The living room was in disarray, the coffee table was overturned, a vase shattered on the floor, and a single drop of blood on the edge of the rug. My heart stopped. I called the police, my hands trembling as I dialed the numbers. Detective Rhonda Boney arrived first, her sharp eyes scanning the room like a hawk. Her partner, Officer Jim Gilpin, followed close behind, his expression unreadable. They asked questions, so many questions. When did you last see your wife, Mr. Dunn? Did you two argue recently? Is there anyone who might want to harm her? I answered as best I could, but every word felt like a trap. Amy and I had our problems, what marriage doesn't, but I never thought it would come to this. As the days passed, the investigation deepened. The media descended on our small town like vultures, turning our private lives into a public spectacle. Headlines screamed, perfect wife missing, husband under suspicion. But here's the thing, Amy wasn't just a perfect wife. She was a mastermind, a puppeteer pulling strings I didn't even know existed. The police found Amy's diary. It was a bombshell. Page after page detailed a marriage in turmoil, a husband who was distant, angry, even violent. According to the diary, I was a monster. But I didn't write those words. I didn't live that life. The diary introduced new characters into the narrative, Dr. Elizabeth Carter, a therapist Amy had been seeing, who painted a picture of a woman living in fear. Mrs. Langdon, our nosy neighbor, claimed to have heard us arguing the night before Amy disappeared. And then there was Tommy O'Hara, an old friend from Amy's past, who painted me as controlling and manipulative. And then there was Desi Collings, Amy's ex-boyfriend. Rich, charming, and obsessed. The police zeroed in on him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was just another pawn in Amy's game. Here's what really happened. Amy wasn't missing. She was hiding. She had staged her own disappearance, meticulously crafting a story that would frame me for her murder. Every detail, the diary, the blood, the witnesses, was part of her plan. She wanted revenge for my infidelity, for the life she felt I had stolen from her. But Amy didn't count on one thing, me. As the investigation unfolded, new characters emerged, each with their own secrets. Margot, my twin sister, was my rock, my confidant. But even she began to doubt me when the evidence piled up. Tanner Bolt, my slick, high-profile lawyer, saw through Amy's lies but warned me that the truth might not be enough. Ellen Abbott, a true crime podcaster, dug into Amy's past, uncovering a pattern of manipulation and deceit that went far beyond our marriage. And then there was Officer Jim Gilpin, who had his own connection to Amy, a brief affair years ago that he'd kept hidden. When I confronted him, he denied it at first, but the guilt in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. Amy's plan began to unravel when she realized she couldn't stay hidden forever. She resurfaced, claiming she had been kidnapped and held captive by Desi. But I knew the truth. In a chilling confrontation, Amy and I faced off. She was calm and calculating, her eyes cold as ice. "You ruined my life," she said. "Now I've ruined yours." But I wasn't going to let her win. I dug deeper, uncovering more of her lies. I found receipts for purchases she'd made under fake names, emails she'd sent to herself to create a trail of evidence, and even a storage unit filled with props she'd used to stage her disappearance. The media frenzy reached its peak when Ellen Abbott released an episode of her podcast, exposing Amy's manipulations to the world. But even then, Amy had one last card to play. She claimed she had been brainwashed by Desi, that she had been a victim all along. The public ate it up, and the police had no choice but to let her go. In the end, Amy and I were trapped in a twisted, toxic marriage, bound together by secrets and lies. The world saw us as a couple reunited, but behind closed doors, we were anything but. I often wonder if I'll ever be free of her. Or if I even want to be. Now, as I sit in this empty house, I can still feel her presence. The walls seem to whisper her name, a constant reminder of the life we shared, and the lives we destroyed. They say the truth will set you free. But sometimes, the truth is just another kind of prison. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Life after Amy's return was anything but normal. The media circus eventually died down, but the scars remained. Everywhere I went, I felt the weight of judgmental stares and whispered accusations. Amy and I moved back into our house, but it no longer felt like home. The walls seemed to close in on me, every corner a reminder of the chaos she had orchestrated. We slept in separate rooms, spoke only when necessary, and lived like strangers under the same roof. Margot tried to stay close, but even she couldn't bridge the growing chasm between us. "Nick, you need to get out of this," she said one evening, her voice tinged with desperation. "You can't keep living like this." But how could I leave? Amy had made sure I was trapped, bound to her by the invisible chains of guilt and fear. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, a new threat emerged. One evening, as I was sorting through the mail, I found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, a grainy image of Amy and me, taken from a distance. On the back, scrawled in block letters, were the words, "I know what you did." My blood ran cold. Who could have sent this? Was it Desi's family seeking revenge? Or someone else entirely? I showed the photo to Amy, hoping for a reaction, but she merely shrugged. "Probably just a prank," she said, her voice dripping with indifference. But I wasn't convinced. Someone was watching us, and they knew more than they should. Determined to uncover the truth, I reached out to Ellen Abbott, the true crime podcaster who had exposed Amy's manipulations. She agreed to help, and together we began digging deeper into Amy's past. What we found was chilling. Amy had a history of manipulating people, dating back to her college days. There were stories of ex-boyfriends who had mysteriously disappeared, friends who had cut ties with her under strange circumstances, and even a former roommate who had accused her of theft. But the most shocking revelation came when we discovered a connection to a cold case from years ago, a young woman who had gone missing under eerily similar circumstances. "Nick, this goes way beyond you," Ellen said, her voice grave. "Amy's been playing this game for a long time." Armed with this new information, I confronted Amy. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. "What else are you hiding?" For a moment, she just stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. "You think you figured me out, don't you?" she said, her voice low and dangerous. "But you have no idea what I'm capable of." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I realized then that I was dealing with someone far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. Desperate to break free, I decided to take a gamble. I reached out to Desi's family, hoping they might have information that could help me expose Amy. What I learned was shocking. Desi had been in contact with Amy before his death, and he had recorded their conversations. In those recordings, Amy admitted to staging her disappearance and framing me. It was the evidence I needed to finally clear my name. But Amy wasn't about to let me win. The final confrontation took place in the house where it all began. Amy and I stood face to face, the tension between us palpable. "You think you've won," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "But you'll never be free of me. Watch me," I replied, holding up the recordings. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Go ahead, she said, her smile returning. Play them. But remember, Nick, I always have a backup plan. And with that, she walked away, leaving me standing there, wondering if I had truly won, or if I had just played into her hands once again. The days after the confrontation with Amy were a blur. I stayed in the house, though it no longer felt like a home. Every creak of the floorboards and every rustle of the curtains made me jump. I kept expecting her to reappear, to unleash whatever backup plan she had hinted at. But she didn't. The silence was deafening. Margot came by often, bringing groceries and trying to coax me out of my shell. You can't keep living like this, Nick, she said one evening, her voice tinged with frustration. You need to move on. Start over. But how could I move on when I didn't even know if it was truly over? Ellen Abbott, the true crime podcaster, stayed in touch. She was working on a follow-up episode about Amy, digging deeper into her past. There's more to this story, Ellen said during one of our calls. Amy didn't just wake up one day and decide to ruin your life. This kind of manipulation takes years of practice. Her words stuck with me. If Amy had been manipulating people for years, who else had she hurt? And how many lives had she destroyed along the way? One afternoon, Ellen called with a breakthrough. I found something, she said, her voice tense with excitement. A woman named Lydia, she went to college with Amy. She says Amy ruined her life too. I met Lydia a few days later at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. She was in her late 30s, with sharp features and a nervous energy. Amy and I were roommates, she began, her voice trembling. At first, she seemed perfect, smart, charming, the kind of person everyone wanted to be around. But then things started to go wrong. Lydia told me how Amy had manipulated her into cutting ties with her family, how she'd sabotaged her relationships, and how she'd even framed her for stealing from their shared apartment. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late, Lydia said, tears welling in her eyes. I lost everything because of her. Her story was eerily similar to mine. It was as if Amy had a playbook, a set of tactics she used to control and destroy the people around her. But why? What drove her to do these things? I decided to dig deeper. I reached out to Dr. Elizabeth Carter, the therapist Amy had been seeing. At first, Dr. Carter was reluctant to talk, citing patient confidentiality. But when I told her about Lydia and the other victims, she agreed to meet. Amy is a textbook case of narcissistic personality disorder, Dr. Carter explained during our meeting. She sees people as tools, as extensions of herself. If you don't serve her needs, she discards you, or worse, destroys you. But why? I asked. What made her this way? Dr. Carter hesitated. Amy's parents played a role. They put her on a pedestal and praised her for being perfect. But that kind of pressure can warp a person. When she couldn't live up to their expectations, she learned to manipulate reality instead. The pieces were starting to come together, but I still couldn't answer one question: what was Amy's backup plan? I didn't have to wait long to find out. One evening, as I was sorting through old boxes in the attic, I found a locked suitcase. It was small and nondescript, but something about it made my skin crawl. I pried it open with a crowbar, and inside, I found a collection of journals, photographs, and USB drives. The journals were filled with Amy's handwriting, detailing her plans and manipulations. There were entries about me, about Desi, about Lydia, and about others I didn't even recognize. But the most chilling entries were the ones about her parents. They made me this way, she had written. They wanted a perfect daughter, so I became one. But perfection is a prison. And now, I'm going to make them pay. The photographs were even more disturbing. They showed Amy's parents in various stages of distress, her mother crying and her father looking defeated. And then there were the USB drives. I plugged one into my laptop, and a video began to play. It showed Amy's parents sitting in their living room, looking terrified. Amy's voice echoed from off-screen. "You wanted perfection," she said. "But perfection comes at a price." The video ended abruptly, leaving me shaken. What had Amy done to her parents? And where were they now? I called Ellen, and together we tracked down Amy's parents. They were living in a small apartment on the other side of town, their once pristine lives reduced to shambles. "Amy destroyed us," her mother said, her voice hollow. "She took everything, our money, our reputation, even our will to live." Her father nodded, his eyes filled with regret. "We thought we were doing the right thing, pushing her to be the best. But we created a monster." As I left their apartment, I felt a mix of anger and pity. Amy had been a victim too, in a way. But that didn't excuse what she had done. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place a few days later. I received a package in the mail, a small, unmarked box. Inside was a single USB drive and a note: "You thought you won. But the game isn't over." I plugged the drive into my laptop, and a video began to play. It showed Amy sitting in a dimly lit room, her face calm and composed. "Hello, Nick," she said, her voice smooth and cold. "If you're watching this, it means you found my little treasure trove. Congratulations. You've come further than anyone else ever has." She leaned forward, her eyes piercing through the screen. "But you're still playing my game. And I always win." The screen went black, and a single line of text appeared: "See you soon." I felt a chill run down my spine. Amy was out there, somewhere, watching and waiting. And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't over.